Welcome to Speak of the Devils, the premier podcast for Sun Devil football. I'm Brad Denny with 3TV.
I'm Joe Healy with devilsdigest.com.
All right, Joe, we are here just weeks away from ASU opening up fall camp. We have kind of unofficially launched season 13 a week ago. Time flies when you're having fun. ASU is starting up fall camp July 31st. We have dates. They're going to be heading up to Camp T. It's starting to feel real.
Yeah, it's all coming together. We're at the 44-day mark, if I'm not mistaken. You see the clock ticking down. Yeah, we're right about within 6 weeks, so that you're getting that point where you can talk about real things about to happen.
Yeah, so last week we counted down the top 10 most important non-quarterback Sun Devils for this upcoming 2023 season. And it's about that time in our regular preseason calendar where we take a big picture look at the Pac-12, at the nation at large, and kind of really get a sense as to what kind of season is going to be shaping up. Of course, this is the last year of the Pac-12 as we know it, the last year of the four-team playoff. So a lot of things are going on, a lot of big topics. Of course, it's not a day that goes by without Pac-12 media deal news. We'll dive into that. We'll tackle it all with the special guest returning for his 10th annual appearance, 11th overall. He's chasing Kyle Dodd, Matt Barrie, ESPN Sports Center anchor, the studio host, and the Thursday night play-by-play voice of ESPN College Football. Always great to catch up with Matt. A lot of good stuff that we'll dive into there. But Joe, we made a big announcement last week, and just in case anybody was under a rock and happened to miss it, what's happening on August 4th?
August the 4th, Friday evening, 6 o'clock, the Graduate Hotel in Tempe. We will be there, live show for the very first time. You don't want to miss that. So we've already had an incredible response as far as the folks who were planning to attend. So jump on that if you can see our posts, and we'll certainly be sharing the information as time goes on for links to RSVP. That's going to help you get reminders about the event, that sort of thing. Yeah, come on out. We're putting together the guest list. We're going to have some good ones no matter what it ends up being, but it's going to be an awesome time. And yeah, because at that point we'll be just a few weeks away from game time itself, so things will be really ramping up and heating up just like they are everywhere here in the Phoenix area. So come on, join us. If you have an RSVP, be sure to do that, and then join us on Friday, August the 4th itself. It starts at 6 p.m. You can go ahead and certainly get there early. We'll be there setting up. You can come and hang out and get yourself a nice little seat. Then also be sure to stay afterward, because the party doesn't end when the mics go off.
Absolutely not. Sun Devil Summit. You probably have heard the stories in hushed tones because they're pretty legendary over the years. Since I believe that the first one was 2013 pre-Wisconsin, right?
Wisconsin, the old
Yeah.
Santan Brewery down downtown Chandler, just created from a bunch of us who BS with one another, on social media, as we still do, of course, to this day. But there are a bunch of us like we've never really met in real life, and it was a huge game. So people like were in town from out of town, that sort of thing. So we had a real good time at that one, and that obviously led to a amazing win, and we had a few more that year. Very memorable season, so it just became kind of its own thing. It's been a little bit since we've really done one, but it's a good time and place to be back.
Yeah, we've always done them like the evening before a big game. So, and those usually translate to wins, like 2014 Notre Dame is another one that jumps out. So maybe perhaps doing it before a season as a whole, that good luck will permeate throughout, and year one under Dilly will go really, really well. What is also continuing to go really, really well for Kenny Dillingham so far in year one, recruiting. Since our last episode that we talked about the batch of 5 new recruits, one more has been added. Linebacker Sire Gaines, a 3-star prospect out of California, 6'1", 200-pounder guy who's a very well-regarded recruit in the state of California, obviously a talent-rich state in its own right. That brings ASU's 2024 tally to 17 at the moment, as the time of this recording, 35 in the national rivals team rankings. Pretty good.
Yeah, not so bad. And that's another one that's kind of been a recent scenario lately, where one of the top competitors for his services was the University of Arizona. So a win within a win there. Boise State, San Diego State, of course, near where he's from. Washington State, a bunch of others from the Pac-12, also the Mountain West, that were recruiting him, a top 50 player overall in the state of California. So someone that could be ready made because of the level of competition there. So you talk about that quantity of players on the recruiting list so far. That's pretty impressive, pretty remarkable, and we'll see how things go and what the philosophies are, because it's still that new normal of the transfer portal, and as we talked about last week with the doing away with the limitations for incoming classes. So there are a lot of different ways you can handle how you acquire talent. Some might go light on the high school recruiting and really focus on the transfer portal. Some might have enough built in in stock to begin with that they can maybe go a little heavier on the high school side of things so they can develop for the future. We'll see how that all pans out.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to track over the coming months, heading into the early signing period in the middle of December. And you mentioned just with the restriction of the class size being that extended for another year, and just having those restrictions be tossed aside. We saw what ASU was able to do, bringing over 50 newcomers. So having that ability to bring in new blood, as Kenny Dillingham and staff really kind of rebuild and revitalize the Sun Devil program, is going to be a really big addition. So it'll be interesting to track that. And of course, we'll be with you each and every week for the duration through signing day as we break everything down. But of course, as we're recording now on this Tuesday evening, Friday, Pac-12 Media Day. It's going to be in Vegas. I'm going to be heading up there. It'll be interesting to talk to the coaches, players from all across the conference, of course. And that, of course, is the one of the signs that you're going to get a lot of preseason lists that are coming out. Some of the watch list, which basically, like, if you play that position and you're returning, you're on a watch list. The Pac-12 today released their all Pac-12 preseason first and second teams. Sun Devils, for the first time since these lists started coming out in 2018, not a single selection. That's a little curious. I think it does speak, Joe, to the overall lack of respect, and perhaps people not paying attention. They just see a program 3-9, new staff coming in, which is understandable in a way. But as I think people who cover this program each and every day and know the kind of the ins and outs going on, a little surprising. 4 Sun Devils did get honorable mentions, though. Running back Cam Scatabo, tight end Jalen Conyers, defensive back Ro Torrance, and special teamer Slater Zellers, ASU's long snapper, came over from Cal. So amongst a couple of these things right here, that's some serious Elijah Badger erasure. I mean, he was a top, at worst, top 4 receiver in the conference a year ago, and to not make first, second, or honorable mention, amongst some other snubs that we can gripe about, but that's just shocking to me.
Yeah, I mean, there's some talented receivers, a handful of 1,000-yard receivers that are returning. You have a few, or at least one, like a Dorian Singer, who switched, to a more powerful program. So if he did what he did, where he did it, to now play with the Heisman Trophy winner, and for them to lose some stars at wide receiver is a good formula for a guy like that to be successful there. So some of the first and second teamers, some of those slots fit because they have some really gaudy numbers, talented players, but numbers that stand off the page of, okay, how can you deny a guy that had 1,000+ yards a year ago? But yeah, to have absolutely no sort of recognition, that's wild to me. Similarly, as far as tight ends are concerned, I mean, you've got Keithy coming back. I know he's the first teamer, so there are some very good tight ends, but Conyers, I expect him to be at certainly a higher level than this sort of accolade, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, I think then it is a preseason, as you'll hear from Matt Barrie. These lists are generally kind of worthless, just kind of media talking points. But it'll be interesting to see just how populated these first and second team and honorable mention lists are. 4 months down the road, when we were talking about what the season that was, because guys like Badger, Conyers, Scottable, I think some other players on defense have a chance to really kind of make a name for themselves. We'll dive into the fall camp preview next week. So, but yeah, just keep in mind that just the national and even regional media are still overlooking the Sun Devils, and we'll see if how vindicated they prove to be with the season ahead. Now, as mentioned, that Pac-12 Media Day is coming up this Friday in Vegas, and one of the reports now then kind of also jives with something that Ray Anderson told me a couple months ago. No news on the media deal is expected at Media Day. It's looking like it might continue to be later in the summer. Ray Anderson told me that he expects July, perhaps even August timeframe. Continuing to track, it seems, and the reporting today from ESPN and amongst other outlets was that the Pac-12 now has some bidders entering in that perhaps weren't present in recent months or hadn't been at the same level. So making some time, trying to go get that best deal. We'll see, but man, I'm just when I cannot hear the words media deal anymore, that'll be a good day.
It seemed like there was, I think, at least had a positive tone to it. I mean, I know that there were those statements about it, not being announced at the media day, but there were some that it seemed at least generally encouraging. I mean, I put this is just something that put such little stock between this and the whole, San Diego State, will they, won't they kind of thing. I'm just at the point where I'm about to let it just unfold because it seems like you're getting new and different or poor information. Like it's coming from all angles. And when it works itself out, it'll work itself out.
Yeah, it's real interesting to see like kind of the media that is kind of a day in day out covering the Pac-12 and the Pac-12 footprint. Your John Wilner's, John Canzanos, striking a more optimistic tone versus some of the more national media. CBS reporter out there seems to be kind of the mouthpiece for the Big 12 and their realignment rumors and any kind of positive movement the Pac-12 seems to have was kind of immediately undercut. It's weird. It's the media games, but the Pac-12 should be getting a deal at some point in the future. When? Who knows? I don't know. I tend to think that it'll probably be comparable, if not maybe a little bit better than the Big 12, but we'll see. I mean, just as the world turns, it's the ongoing soap opera, but it is what it is. Whether it's the ESPN, Fox, Apple TV, CW, wherever, we'll watch some football.
I mean, literally anything would be better. I mean, absolutely anything. Just something where, goodness, if you can just pay a streaming service $10 to $20 a month, cancel it if you want to cancel it, get it back if you want to get it back. I think you're in good shape there. It's a simple type of thing. It's just been so far behind the times as far as how you can function within basic TV and providing that to your fan base, and especially to a new fan base. It's time to get that part of it over with and kind of move into the 21st century a little bit.
I'm just hoping, like, why don't they just like roll out something like MLB TV or NFL Sunday Ticket or something? Just like pay a flat fee for your team or whatever tiers you want. You get them all and just have to, and just from one. I don't know. Maybe it's just going back to bundling, like the cable days. Who knows? It's all cyclical. Time's a flat circle. In any event, so let's before we dive into the Matt Barrie interview and then our look ahead at the national and Pac-12 football landscape for 2023. Joe, some news in the baseball front. Luke Hill, the starting shortstop for your Sun Devils, a guy I've been pretty complimentary of, and was very impressed with his debut season coming over from Louisiana and from day one being a starter. Jumped in the portal on the last day and announced his commitment to Ole Miss. Willie Bloomquist did not take kindly to that. He did not hold back, and this is something that you really don't see a head coach of a major program kind of going off. The quote, and I want to make sure I get it correct here, said, "I know their makeup, and they were not happy with how it went down. Not the fact that he's gone, not the fact that he transferred. It's just how it went down. A matter of fact, a lot of them think we're going to be much better without him, minus the attitude that at times showed its head with him." That's candid comments from a pissed off head coach. Something that I don't know.
Joe, they're both they're you can see multiple sides of it. I mean, Willie's a competitor. We know that. I mean, as great as you could ever want, and sometimes that's hard to push down, and especially if you happen to feel betrayed. Like I certainly have no idea, the behind the scenes type of stuff as far as what those were directly referring to. And yes, you can certainly, there are good and bad ways to transfer from a program. I mean, that's just the simple fact of it. And I don't know the reality of what exactly happened here. They're waiting to the 11th hour. I'm not necessarily going to, completely beat someone over the head, for that sort of thing. It's a very difficult decision to make. So there are ways that sort of thing can go about. I mean, these things sound a little bit reminiscent to some of the actions that we saw after Jaden Daniels decided to transfer. It can really get under the skin of your teammates if you leave the wrong way or leave it all. I mean, I think that a lot of them are pretty understanding for the most part. Hey, if you got to find a better position for yourself, better spot for yourself, then hey, go do that. So if the departure happens unceremoniously, then yeah, that can rouse people up. Like I said, I have zero personal idea. Like when I saw that first, when I heard about the transfer, that was surprising. Then obviously the quotes and things today were surprising as well. But I feel like maybe some of us, myself very much included, felt like this was almost spoken to existence months ago, because that was honestly like the player on the team. Because nowadays you got to look, all right, who are the young guys that will use ASU as a stepping stone? Luke Hill from Baton Rouge that would have made a lot of sense. Now, obviously, LSU national championship team, super loaded, but going to the SEC to play for a team that just won a national championship a couple of years ago, that's a formidable program itself, even though I know they struggled quite a bit this past year, if I'm not mistaken. So, yeah, I mean, that's an interesting deal. But again, on one side, it is rare that you hear a coach be that candid about things. On one side, I don't mind a guy sticking up for his team if he feels that that's the right thing to do, and that's a decision that Willie had to make. So that can resonate in good and bad ways. It can resonate in good ways in the sense of he's sticking up for his clubhouse. He's sticking up for his guys. And when you're trying to get a tight knit group of guys and get this thing turned around, that can be valuable. Now, obviously, that's something that can have a slippery slope to it in this day and age of a lot of transfers. So, yeah, that was interesting to see. But like I said, I truly can understand both sides of it. I don't completely blame him for it, and don't mind him sticking up for the clubhouse. But yeah, it's just yet another perilous tale of the transfer portal and what that all does.
Yeah, it's interesting, especially given that Kenny Dillingham addressed the media a day ago and was also talking about kind of the similar things in terms of NIL, the approach, and I think there's a nice compare and contrast opportunity here. I think Kenny handled it great. And he talked about how he's not, obviously you can't use an NIL as an enticement, although it's college football, college sports. But those are the rules. But the focus for Kenny is just rewarding the players who come here, put in the work to be rewarded with NIL. Willie, his comments today really kind of had like an old man at yelling at cloud type of vibe to me. And then I think the comments specifically about Luke Hill, as you said, Joe, I do think you got to stand up for your clubhouse. I just think that some of the word, the tone, and the things that I don't think it's a good look for a head baseball coach. And perhaps just it's a passionate topic, and you lose a guy, a budding star, in the situation that kind of things unfolded on the last day, no less. As you mentioned, there's three, kind of three sides to every story. One, like, in this case, Luke, Willie, and then probably somewhere in the middle is a truth and what really shook out. But it just, I don't know. It just kind of really when you saw what Willie had to say and how he said it today versus what Kenny said a day ago, a little interesting. But we'll see what happens. This is a baseball program that, as we talked about all spring long, had some good moments and then a terrible, disappointing finish, and to lose a budding superstar at shortstop going back home, which is understandable at this time. And you're in the NIL era, if you're a program like ASU, you're going to have some problems keeping some talent that's kind of perhaps from those traditional baseball regions. But we'll see what happens. What kind of fallout this has. If this kind of reaction galvanizes the clubhouse, maybe turns off any potential recruits. We'll see. But in any event, Ole Miss got themselves a good infielder, and ASU's got some questions to answer this offseason. But Luke Hill's Joe's not the only member of this Sun Devil baseball program that has left since our last show.
Yeah, and I think this was just even announced today as well. A couple changes in the coaching staff with Travis Buck. He is now with Loyola Marymount, and that's something that I think just kind of made its way on Twitter. It didn't seem like there was a bunch of buzz coming through the shoots about it. Coaching staff issues in college baseball are very interesting with, just the things that they can and can't do. So would have been wonderful to see T-Buck stick around. Obviously, he's a program legend. Have a ton of respect for that guy. And so hopefully if this helps his career trajectory, puts him better in, short and long-term position, then hey, go for it. Now, adding to the staff, Anthony Gillage, if I'm getting it right, and pardon me if I'm not, comes to Arizona State with a, unique resume, former head coach of Central Arizona, and he's a multiple-time national champion coach there. So, I mean, this is someone that's got some major chops in that regard. And that's a junior college that has produced quite a bit of talent, not only to ASU, but elsewhere. So that's, some experience and some success at the community college level that comes down at Arizona State.
All right, joining the program now, the 10th year. I mean, we got a nice round number anniversary here, but the 11th appearance overall, which is a key number because it ties him with Kyle Dodd. He's, of course, him from Sports Center, ESPN's college football, and Thursday night play-by-play announcer, the one, the only, the great ASU alum himself, Matt Barrie. Matt, welcome back to the show. How are you today?
When you send these out, when you hit me up to do the annual interview, you think it's another year, and then you hit me up and you say, wow, this is the 10th year doing it. And it's amazing when you think about all of the discussions that have been had in the last 10 years about Arizona State football. Watching your guys' growth has been incredible to where you guys are now. I will beat Dot at some point, even if I come on here for 5 minutes every other week during the season to make sure I could widen my gap with him. But all is good, and I'm looking forward to breaking down ASU, the Pac-12, and what we've got coming up this season.
Absolutely. So let's go back just a few months. Obviously, the end of a very difficult season for the Sun Devil football program. A coaching change is made, and then a familiar name, Kenny Dillingham, is named as the next face and leader of Sun Devil football. When you heard that happen, what were the first thoughts in your head?
Yeah, look, just some of the conversations that as a part of behind the scenes and really understanding what it is that Arizona State football needed after Herm. And it's an interesting phase of where ASU is now as a program. If you go back to 19 and kind of the development of that young team, if you go to the COVID year in 20, that young team was growing up. And then if you look at that team in 21, it was the most talented team in the Pac-12. They were more talented than USC. They were more talented than Oregon. They were more talented than Utah. And at that time, I think we all felt that we were on the cusp of something great with the recruiting rankings and everything going on post-COVID. But then the investigation hit, and you're thinking, well, where are we now? What's going to happen? Where is this program? And I remember talking to someone, we were up, I think it was 21-7 at the half at Utah in 21. You win that game, you're in the Pac-12 championship. And maybe we're not having a conversation about Jaden transferring and all these other transfers, Chip Trainum and everybody leaving the program, Ricky Pearsall. And from that moment, from halftime of 21 against Utah until what ended up culminating in the entire coaching staff getting fired and Herm losing his job, I haven't seen a program go through a fall like that when everything looked and appeared to be so good. And so that gets me to the Kenny Dillingham point where I was very vocal with people that I needed to be vocal with about what kind of job I thought this was, what kind of job this fit, and who needed to be leading this program going forward. I said it a million times to anyone who would listen. I didn't care for an established coach from a big program that had been fired. I didn't want that. I personally didn't think that that was the right fit. Well, why? Because typically these guys that were at top flight programs, and you could probably deduce who I'm talking about by saying some of the biggest programs in the country to get fired. When they get fired from a huge job, they're still not over it. And we saw it with Kevin Sumlin in Arizona. He had Texas A&M. He was getting the number one recruit and quarterback in the country every year. Well, that wasn't good enough. He got fired. He wasn't ready to succeed at Arizona. He wasn't over getting fired at Texas A&M. And so a lot of these big-time coaches that coach these top-flight programs, they just want to get back in. All right, well, what's your connection to ASU? Nothing. What's your connection to the Valley? Nothing. It's just a job for me to get back in. I didn't think that's where Arizona State needed to go. And every time you'd sit there and you would talk to some alum, we would text, we would figure it out. Every time you started pointing out what ASU needed, connection to the university, a young coach that can identify with these young players, someone who could literally look you and me in the eye and say that this is my dream job, someone that's not a threat to bail, any of this stuff. And it kept coming back to Kenny Dillingham. And Herm was a risk. There's no doubt about that hiring, that there was a risk. I think we would all agree there were some moments in there that were trending really, really well. And ultimately, the pro model, it didn't work. In fact, it failed miserably. And so that risk begot a risk that ASU had no choice but to take. And Kenny will be the first one to tell you, he's 33 years old. He's the youngest coach in FBS. He's never been a head coach before. In fact, he's never coached on the sidelines in college football. But that's the risk that this program needed to take because of where we are right now, not only is an Arizona State football program big picture, but where we are in college football in general, which is NIL, youth, recruiting, and really honing in on what you need to build a program. And I'll say this about Kenny, and it's one of the things that I didn't think the prior staff did well. And I was vocal about it to Herm quite a bit. You need, and Kenny, this is Kenny's mantra, activate the Valley. I'm sick and tired of working on college football Saturdays at ESPN and doing highlights all day and naming 5 or 6 kids that grew up in Arizona that are playing in the SEC or the Big Ten. And I think that's what you needed, a guy that was going to say, you know what, we're going to build a wall around our state. We're going to build a wall around our valley. We're going to get the talent from Scottsdale, Saguaro. You know, maybe because Dillingham went to Chaparral, we can get a couple of them too. But we're going to do that because we're going to make ASU Arizona's hometown team. And so it's a really long answer to your question. But I think when you look at checking a box for everything that Arizona State had to do, you didn't need to go get Tom Herman. You didn't need to go get some of these other coaches that had experience. You needed a coach who could learn and understand the risks of this job and grow with it. And that's what we got in Kenny.
Obviously has those local ties are pretty powerful, not just to the Valley, to the university, and you can tell the passion is there anytime you talk to him. But one of the guys that is the only guy that was retained on his staff is a guy that I know the last time that we talked, you spoke pretty glowingly about the job that he was doing and under some very difficult circumstances, and Sean Aguano, another guy that's like just really dialed in and piped into the Valley, the scene, and obviously the job that he's done here at Arizona State in the last few years. How much of an impact do you think, and how big and important was it that Sean Aguano was retained?
I would say of all the things Kenny did going into it, of all the things he did to ingratiate himself to the fan base, I think number one was retaining Sean Aguano. That was number one. Because Aguano was put in an impossible position, an absolute impossible position. He inherited a team that all but quit against Eastern Washington. Is that who it was? Eastern Washington, the embarrassing loss.
Michigan.
Eastern Michigan.
Chris Creighton's doing good things up there.
Yeah, Chris Creighton does have that thing going. But you had a team that basically just, they quit. And so you'd have to now inherit a team that's under investigation. You don't know where their heads are. And you find a way to make them believe. And one of the biggest things in college football, it's completely different in the NFL for that reason. You're in a room with 18 to 22-year-olds that are now getting NIL, that are now basically wealthy college students. But at the end of the day, they still got to believe. And Aguano somehow did it. And he fixed it. The record didn't indicate it, but he fixed the morale as good as you can do it. And he won the hearts of a lot of people in the Valley and a lot of people nationally. And so Kenny had to say, you know what? I'm the head coach, and I know you were the interim coach, but you mean everything to this program and to this area. You're coming in my bunker, and we're going to do this. And so I think retaining him was the best thing that Kenny did to start off his tenure.
And then in the 7 months since then, obviously he has a great press conference, but the value of winning a press conference is pretty minimal. But of course, makes the decision to keep Sean Aguano, assemble a pretty good staff, got some good recruiting chops on there as well. But over the last 7 months, when he's actually got to start doing some head coach stuff, he's got to start the process of rebuilding this program. What things have kind of jumped out to you, perhaps even impressed you a little bit over the course of now once he was in seat and getting into the meat of the job?
So that he knew going in, like he wasn't shy about it to people he talks with. And you guys have seen it out there. The roster had to be completely flipped. It had to be completely rebuilt. And that's not an indictment on the prior staff because the talent was here, but they transferred. And so when you lose a quarterback that's going to be a Heisman candidate in the SEC, when you lose a guy like Ricky Pearsall, when you lose some of these guys that were on the roster and you had no depth because you weren't recruiting off, you didn't have any depth. There was an exodus. You had to come in and flip the roster. And so the first thing, and mind you, Kenny's done this at other place before. Florida State had a complete roster flip that he was a part of. So he's seen the bones of how it's done. So I think the first thing for him was getting in here and bringing in the talent. And obviously retaining Elijah Badger was huge. Jalen Conyers, huge. Like these are some top flight players that I think got hosed in all Pac-12 media, the all Pac-12, but whatever. That's a preseason for the media nerds to talk about. It doesn't matter in the big picture. Go play. You'll be on the all Pac-12 when it counts. But He had to go flip the roster. And so he did that, I think, as good as he could under the circumstances he was dealt. What I am loving that he's doing and this entire staff is doing, look at the 24 recruiting class. I mean, they are so ahead of the game in the 24 recruiting class. Some recruiting services have them ranked somewhere in the low 30s or high 30s, low 40s. And so he's getting ahead on that and plugging holes in the transfer portal. Getting Rashada was such a big deal for this university because we know Jaden's story. I know you covered it extensively here on this podcast. But what you had to do is you had to put out there that it's okay to commit to Arizona State. And I would tell people in interviews about when they would ask me about ASU football. And I said, guys, what are people in the Valley? Sky has fallen with this investigation. It's not. Like, look at Tennessee. Tennessee committed far worse than, as I understand, what Arizona State's up for. And they were number 1 last year for 2-3 weeks in the college football playoff rankings. You can sustain success while getting an $8 million fine, reduction of scholarships throughout the year. But this is like, it was COVID visits. Like there was no need for the attention that got put on this the way that it did to put a negative connotation around Arizona State football. And for Kenny to come in step 1 of his tenure and make ASU football exciting again and have people excited about it again so quickly after what just happened, to me, I think that's the most impressive thing I've seen. End the narrative of you can't come play at Arizona State. End the narrative that positive things aren't going on. Let's do this together. Let's be young. Let's be fun. Let's make mistakes together and build this thing what we know it can be. And I'll say this. I was on social media the other day, and it started going around. I don't know if it was on ESPN Classic. I don't know where it was airing. But that Notre Dame-Arizona State game when ASU – now, I'm going to say this. ASU was ranked 9th coming into that game against Notre Dame, ranked 10th. Sun Devil Stadium was sold out. And some of these current players were tweeting it. Like, wow, that's amazing. It can be done. That wasn't that long ago. And so he's got people believing in that mindset. And I think for me, that was the most important first step as head coach of Arizona State is let people know that it's going to be okay with Arizona State football. And I think he's done that.
And one of the guys that you mentioned that was kind of an early win for Dillingham was Jaden Rashada, the elite quarterback recruit. Deciding to come back home, play in his father's footsteps in Tempe. But he joins a quarterback room that already has the Notre Dame transfer Drew Pine. But, of course, the returning starter, Trenton Bourguet, the Arizona homegrown kid, had some good moments last year and coming off in his story, of course, from walk-on now to the starting job. But now he looked good in spring, but obviously a lot of things can happen in the fall, and especially, once fall camp gets going. What did you see from Bourguet in terms of his leadership of this offense now coming in for a new regime? And what do you think needs to happen for him to keep the job, but not only to keep the job, but also to have success in the season ahead?
I'll tell you this. I want to start with Drew because I think Drew Pine's a hell of a quarterback. And this is my 10th appearance. You and I have talked about transfer quarterbacks before numerous times, and they haven't really gone well. But I think Drew Pine's different, and I think he's a really good player. But I'll say this, and I've told multiple people this. I even told Kenny this. I don't think Trenton Bourguet is going to go away. I don't think that he's going to show up to practice and give a damn about Drew Pine coming in, who's a highly rated recruit, and then this 4 or 5 star everything and Rashada. I don't think he cares. And I use this comparison lightly because he's my favorite Arizona State player of all time. And I think he's one of the greatest Sun Devils of all time. There's something about this 16 that reminds me of the last 16 and Jake Plummer, because you just get the sense all he wants to do is compete and win. He was a walk-on. No one wanted him. Walk-on. He's got 4 and 5 stars ahead of him on the depth chart or on the depth chart with him. And those are the guys. Those are the guys that you want to win with. Because I'll tell you this, when Emory got hurt last year and Trenton came in, I probably had 5 people within the ESPN college football ecosystem texting me asking, who the hell is this guy? This guy's great. You need to start Bourguet. You need to start Bourguet. You need to start Trenton. that's what he does. And I think the quarterback competition's going to be fierce. I don't think any fans should anticipate anything out of Rashada this year. I don't want that. I think he's got some developing, some growing into his body. I think there's some stuff that Kenny can do with him that'll benefit him down the road. I think this is a Drew Pine, Trenton Bourguet race. And that's all I'll say. I think they're in a great position because I think I'd go to bat with Drew Pine right now. But I love 16. There's just something about him that takes me back to yesteryear of that he's a guy that's just going to get the offense and he's going to distribute the ball. He's going to make this thing work. And look, any coach tell you this, Brad, Kenny's not going to decide who the starting quarterback is. The team will. You'll know immediately when they come out of Camp T or as we get closer to the season, it's going to be obvious. It's going to show itself in practice. And so I think either of these kids are going to do something good in this offense. So I would say, honestly, the quarterback position in Arizona State, it's healthy.
Regardless of who wins that job, they got a bevy of really good targets, probably none more dangerous than tight end Jalen Conyers. You alluded to it earlier, the preseason all Pac-12 teams came out. His name wasn't on there. I mean, it was an honorable mention, but what we saw him do over the second half of last season when the offense decided to start incorporating the tight end a little bit, great things happened. He looked phenomenal during spring, like he leveled up. Where do you think that Conyers kind of stacks up perhaps nationally? Obviously, you got the Brock Bowers of the world getting deservedly getting a lot of the national attention, and Conyers right at this point is a little under the radar. Do you think he has the ability to kind of make a national name for himself this fall?
Yeah, and I kind of like here. I tell players this a lot, or when you're talking with coaching staffs, I like the guys that don't get attention. Well, why? Because most players crave attention. And anybody who watched Jalen Conyers play football knows that when the kid's got the ball in his hands, he's special. And so these guys need to not worry about the attention they're not getting now, because you make plays and you score touchdowns and you make highlights and you win football games, the attention's going to find you. It just is. It's the attention's job to find you. It's our job at ESPN on a college football Saturday to find the good highlights. And at the end of the day, yeah, he's going to be one of the best, if he's not already, one of the best tight ends in the country. He sure as hell is going to be one of the best in the Pac-12. And that's going to play itself out. These preseason lists, they're for media. They're for us it's talking season. I've had a different SEC coach with me on SportsCenter every day this week from SEC Media Days. What are we doing? We're talking. We're asking them preseason questions. Well, when Saturday hits, you're going to know who the best players are in the country. Same with Elijah. Listen, he just needed to grow into his speed and understand what it was like to play college football. Now, if he gets it, forget it. There's a lot of guys on this team. If they just get it, forget it's the talent is raw. It's kind of like our head coach, right?
Yeah.
It's a raw talent. You see it. I mean, I watched every 27 minutes of his press conference yesterday. I know what game he's playing. It's a game we all need to play. And so he's the tight end. He's going to be special. And if I'm a quarterback, I've said this a million times to talking ball with people. Tight ends are a quarterback's binky. It's the best friend. You know, we see it in the NFL with Mahomes and Kelsey. When I was in Dallas traveling with the Cowboys, Romo and Witten. I mean, there's just always a good chemistry between quarterback and tight end. ASU's got that in Conyers.
So as you alluded to a little bit earlier, you know, Tennessee finally learned kind of the penalties that would be handed down to them. It's been about over 2 years since ASU first learned that the investigation was going on to their COVID period, recruiting infractions. Still have no real idea in terms of what kind of timeline the NCAA and their glacial pace is going to kind of come forth with any kind of advancements. When all is said and done, what do you think is going to happen to the Sun Devil program as a result of these allegations, and how much do you think that might hinder the progress and the work of Kenny Dillingham?
It's so hard to say. Look, if I knew what the NCAA was thinking, I'd be a billionaire. You know, I would say, look, I know some of the conversations that have been had. I know some of the questions that have been had. I know who they've spoken to. Look, I think Here's what I'll tell you that I will give the NCAA credit for this. Not putting Tennessee on a postseason ban was a really good thing. Because what does that do? That impacts the players that are there and had nothing to do with it. The best thing that ASU did during this investigation was they gutted the assistant coaching staff pretty quick for 2 years. And Herm was really the last one to go. And so ASU, from an administrative standpoint, handled the coaching thing, right? Players have exited out. I'm sure you guys have the number because you're doing it every day. I would bet, and tell me if I'm right or wrong, there's maybe 10 guys from a Herm Edwards roster from a couple of years ago, maybe.
Yeah, it's something like it. I mean, just this offseason alone is about 50 newcomers. And so, yeah, I mean,
Right.
It's not a big number.
So this thing's been turned over is what
Yeah.
I'm getting at. So if the NCAA is doing their job, which, again, is debatable sometimes, look at what the infractions were. Look at where the program is now. I would imagine there's going to be some sort of monetary fine. Again, I don't know, but there's going to be some sort of, just going off other punishments, some monetary fine. I don't know what that's going to be. I don't know if it's going to be as much as Tennessee. $8 million basically equates to maybe 1 or 2 bowl games of income that you get from a bowl, and probably a little bit of a scholarship reduction. But end of the day, I mean, we just need to move on. And I think that it goes back to an answer I had earlier about one of the positive things about Kenny is Herm and those guys couldn't recruit during this investigation. They just couldn't. No one was like, I'm not going there. And somehow Kenny got people to believe that you still could come here and play football. And I would hope the NCAA would rule soon, because the NCAA is losing a lot of juice within the college football ecosystem because of where this sport's headed.
NIL obviously has reshaped the college sports landscape in general. And of course, ASU's had its struggles, kind of fits and starts, and trying to get involved in that game. And Kenny Dillingham, from the introductory press conference, started the rallying cry of activating the Valley and kind of getting the donor, the base, the alumni base, the Valley at large to get behind this program. And some comments he made yesterday in terms of just wanting to use that as an enticement, or for the players that are already here, but not in a recruiting sense, obviously, but just, he wants that if the players come out here, they put in the work and they succeed, he wants, the maximum amount of money to come their way from the local businesses, from the Activate the Valley kind of efforts. As a local guy, you understand this Valley very well. What does the Sun Devil program, and it's kind of the fan base, the community as a whole, need to do to kind of close the gap that in the NIL space that ASU currently faces?
Yeah, that's such a tough one, because you never want to tell people how to spend their money or donate their money, because everybody works hard for it. I know what goes on at these programs down south. I know what happens up at the big timers in the Big Ten. I'm around it all the time with my job, and it's different. I mean, it's much different at USC than it is at Arizona State. And so you have to tap into businesses and other ways for these players to be compensated for their work and their hard work and their dedication. Look, if these guys are dedicated to my university, they're dedicated to your university, they're dedicated to your state, then there should be some dedication in return. ASU just doesn't have these tycoons that some of these other programs do. They just don't. I mean, Texas A&M's got an oil tycoon at every. You can hit a 9-iron and find another oil tycoon. ASU just doesn't have that. Got to get creative with it, and I think that they will. I think Arizona State will get very creative in the NIL space to find a way to compensate these kids to where there's an incentive to stay. I know of a couple kids that transferred. It was all money. Hey man, I got to take care of my family. School X is offering me this. I got to go. Well, yeah, you do. And so we can just get it to a point where you're offering the kid enough to be happy. It'll go a long way. Cause look, I know Arizona has all 4 pro sports organizations. I mean, there's a lot to do out there, but man, there's something about that town when ASU's going. And I hope some ASU alum, some of the guys that I went to school with, One of them, he's got a last name of a very prominent car dealership in the Valley. He could probably take care of a couple guys. But it's not going anywhere. How do you perfect it? That remains to be seen.
That kind of leads to my next question. So obviously, it's currently like the Wild West and has been for a couple of years. A few states have legislation at various stages to perhaps try to impact the NIL sphere in their particular borders. Overall, we make Matt Barrie the czar of college football. What kind of measures are restrictions, regulate? What are you doing on the NIL space to try to maybe corral things a little bit more in terms of the current just anything goes chaotic landscape?
Man, it's gonna be so hard to get it back because people were so eager to get this out and yelling and screaming about, oh, there needs to be compensated. No one ever argued that the players should be compensated, but there was a way to do it. And the NCAA screwed this up to a level unthought of when now here we are. They could have addressed this years ago and didn't, and now we are where we are. And so there's numerous ways to do it, but then it goes into the conversation we have about where's college football headed. I think there's about 60 teams or so, 60 schools rather, that make a lot of TV revenue from being in a Power 5. Well, could you take that Power 5 TV money or whatever some of the income is and fairly divvy it up amongst the players so the players are getting a cut of the money coming in? Well, then they have to be employees, and there's that whole fight with it. It just got so – the fact that they got to get Congress involved lets you know that someone did something pretty stupid. And so I just don't know how you regulate it because, it was going on before this, right? There was money exchanging. It's college football. It's been happening forever. But now it's not under a table. It's like, hey, come to my car dealership and sign a couple of ball caps. And for that, I'll give you $2 million. Oh, by the way, you still got to come play football at X. So it needs to get fixed. It needs to get regulated somehow. I don't know that answer because at this point, I mean, if you're Tim Cook, CEO of Apple, well, he's an Auburn alum. What if he just said, hey, you know what? There's this quarterback that is in California, and I don't know that he's doing this, using him as an example because he's such a big timer. I'm going to put him in an Apple commercial and give him unlimited iPads. And we don't, who else has that? Only Auburn, because they've only got to see one CEO of Apple. So it's just, it drives us nuts how out of hand this got. And I just hope at some point there's a way to bring it back in enough to make it to where it's fair for some schools like Arizona State, who's going up against USC, who's got deep pockets, Oregon and Phil Knight and Nike. They're one of the best at NIL. So it's tough. And I just don't know at this point what you can do until some really smart people get in a room and figure it out.
So obviously one of the big things that's going on kind of existential level for ASU is the Pac-12 and its current ongoing saga of the media deal. Reporting today says that there will be no announcement of a media deal or any kind of update this Friday's Pac-12 Media Day. That kind of goes in line with when I sat down with Ray Anderson back in May. He said that he expects a deal perhaps later in the summer, even into August. But at this point, really, who knows? How worried are you about the long-term viability and survival of the Pac-12?
Oh, I mean, with this day and age, I'd be stunned if it's around for another 5 years. I mean, you just lost your biggest brand in USC. UCLA went with them. You can't tell me one of these other power conferences is trying to poach Oregon and Washington. Okay, well, there go two more. You've got Arizona, who's a powerhouse in college hoops. Well, where would they fit nice? Oh, the Big 12, because the Big 12 is a hell of a basketball conference. Oh, what also makes sense in the Big 12? Arizona State, Colorado, Utah. So there's 4. You lose Washington and Oregon. There's 6. Well, what happens to Cal and Stanford? I don't know. Stanford's a good academic school, and they've fallen on some hard luck in football lately, but Big Ten would sign up tomorrow for the 2 academic schools. Well, who does that leave? Oregon State and Washington State. And then what are you? Do they join the Mountain West? Does the Pac-12 pick up San Diego State and Boise? I don't know. I just know that the realignment's not done. And the Pac-12, soon to be the Pac-10 again, is going to have a really hard – see, where the Pac-12 screwed up, I'd have gotten BYU years ago. I would have brought in BYU and probably San Diego State years ago just to get a step ahead. I mean, BYU beats Pac-12 schools every year. So I'd have picked them up immediately. And so with how this thing's shaping, with the TV media rights, losing the LA schools was catastrophic to this league. And so, look, Oregon knows its place in the sport right now, and they know their value. And that's the same with Washington. And by the way, both of those teams are going to be really good this year. And so, I don't know, man. This thing, to me, just based on everything else we've seen, is trending in a dissolve of the Pac-12, Pac-10, and I just hope we don't see it anytime soon.
All right, so as we're winding down here, let's talk about the season ahead. Get some of the predictions for you. Obviously, there'll be one more season of the Pac-12 as we've currently come to know it. How do you see the season playing out? Which two teams are going to be battling in Vegas when it's all said and done?
Well, I just talked about Oregon and Washington. They're really, really good. And oh, by the way, USC's got the returning Heisman Trophy winner. They brought in some more portal guys. It's year 2 of Lincoln Riley. That's 3. But I still believe the league goes through Utah. I think they are still the class of the league. They've got the right people coming back. They've got the right mentality going there in Utah. I still believe, and here's the difference with Utah. Oregon and USC, and Michael Penix Jr. kind of changed the trajectory of Washington last year, which is why I think they come back with a lot of attention. USC's glitzy and fun and skill positions and Heisman trophies and celebrities and Matt Leinart and Reggie Bush. That's always been USC's brand. Oregon is the Pacific Northwest. It's Nike, it's uniforms. It's back in the day with Chip Kelly and speed. And it's all of that. That's always been Oregon. You know what Utah does? They just line up and beat you to hell. That's what they do. They don't care about the uniforms and the 5 stars and the blazing. They just line up and beat the hell out of you. And until someone proves that they can beat them back and hit them back, it's Utah. Now, this could be the year if USC figures it out defensively that they get them. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I will always put Utah into the Pac-12 championship and someone tells me otherwise. And I think just because of everything they got coming back, I'll put USC in there.
They had a couple of classic games a year ago. So
they did. Yeah. And again, that was year 1 of Lincoln. So my guess is he'll figure that out at some point.
All right. So got to give love to the G5. You know, obviously they got a spot in the New Year's 6. Yeah. Which G5 do you think has the inside track and getting that spot?
Man, we lost them all. They all went to the Big 12. You know, like I was all on. I called a UCF game last year on Thursday Night College Football, and I was like, this program could hang with anybody. Then they, obviously they're going to the Big 12. Same with Houston. They're headed to the Big 12. We loved the Tulane story last year, didn't we? They lost a lot of their players at Pratt. I believe Michael Pratt's back, but their running back, he went to the NFL, Tajay Spears.
Yeah.
So Cincinnati, look, all of our G5s are Cincinnati's in the Big 12. So it's going to be interesting to see which these guys can hang in there with the schedule debate again, because we already talked about that. Well, they don't play enough schedule. Well, you just took 4 of the best ones to a Power 5. And so I really hope some of these G5 schools hang in there long enough to still be able to compete at a high level, because that Willie Fritz story and that turnaround last year was incredible.
Final season of the 4-team playoff.
Yeah.
Which 4 teams are you putting in there as of right now, and which one ultimately holds the crystal football?
Well, schedule-wise, Georgia, I mean, they've got enough quarterbacks to come back. I love Georgia again this year. I believe LSU is coming out of the West again. I believe it's going to be an LSU-Georgia SEC championship game. I could see 2 teams again from the SEC. I could see LSU making it. I think the Pac-12 gets one in this year. I think Pac-12 is getting one in. I think it's going to be USC. In their final year in the Pac-12, I can see them running to the playoff. And then look, Ohio State's loaded. Michigan's loaded. It's so tough to say now, but I'll give you 2 SECs, LSU, Georgia. I'll give you USC, and I'll give you Michigan's been there a couple of years. Ohio State, they had 2 teams in there. I'm going to give you Harbaugh and Michigan again.
Okay.
For the 3rd year in a row. He's got that thing going. I just don't know. Look, I'd love to see the AC. I'd love to see Florida State come back. I want to see Miami come back. We'll see what Cade Klubnik does, the young kid at quarterback for Clemson. I'd love to see that conference represented again, but you look at the SEC West, I mean, it is absolutely, I know people roll their, I mean, it is loaded, absolutely loaded when you consider Ole Miss with Lane Kiffin. He's got everybody coming back. When you consider Will Rogers is back at Mississippi State, Hugh Freeze is back in the league at Auburn, Brian Kelly's in year 2 at LSU, Nick Saban is Nick Saban. I mean, it's insane how loaded that side is. Tennessee's on the up. Shane Beamer at South Carolina in the East. Florida under Billy Napier. I mean, there's so much good football out there. We need the Pac-12, even if it is USC, to get back into the college football playoff discussion, just to help boost up the league before, whatever happens to it afterwards.
Yeah, I was trying to make my 4, and I had LSU in there as well, because it'd be interesting to see like ASU fans and seeing Jaden Daniels get in there, or even to Florida State with Mike Norvell, some familiar faces in there. But ultimately, when we look ahead just for this 2023 season, year 1 of the Kenny Dillingham era in Tempe, come December, what do you need to see over these next few months to feel that this first year of this new era was a success?
Yeah. Everyone's like, whoa, what do you want for the record? I'm not going to give you a record because I think that's unfair. I want to see belief on the field. Like I want to see effort. It sounds so stupid and easy, but what was it? 70-7, 77-7 down in Tucson. What was that?
70-7.
70-7. There wasn't effort on the other side. ASU went in there and curb stomped, but there wasn't effort on the other side. It's easy to tell when there's effort. There wasn't effort in that loss last year to Eastern Michigan. Okay. So I want to see 12 games of belief. Kenny's going to make mistakes as your rookie head coach, but I want to go into the Arizona game saying, you know what? This thing's headed in the right direction. And even the losses are close. Even in the games where they're going to be double-digit underdogs, they fight until the fourth quarter. Because to me, that's the ultimate indication of buy-in. Buy-in is the ultimate indication going into the fourth quarter. Coaches quitting or players quitting, that's the ultimate sign that the coach has lost the team. And so year 1 of Kenny, just fight and keep fighting. Pull off an upset people don't think you can. Take every game to the fourth quarter and beat U of A. You get all that in, and I'm going to be a happy guy going at the end of year 1 for Kenny.
Well, Matt, as always, awesome time talking college football with you. It's great to, the 10 years strong now, and we'll make sure to definitely get you back on the show during the season so you can jump ahead of Kyle Dodd in the all-important Speak of the Devil.
Yeah, I'll hit you up. I'm going to email you and say, hey, we need to get back on. I got to shut Dodd up, and we'll do it. Even if it's a 5-minute, hey, what'd you see at ASU this week? I will do it just to stay ahead of him.
Sounds good. Maybe after ASU takes down Coach Prime to open up Pac-12 play.
That would be amazing. Yes, book it.